Kids these days. Good afternoon, kids these days. Thank you. So, why did the teenager cross the road? Because somebody told him not to. So kids these days, I've been around kids these days for years and years and years, teaching and learning from thousands of kids. And when it comes to kids of this generation, of course your world is different. Of course you face different challenges than any of us did in the past. But there is something we all have in common, and that is learning. And what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. So how do we create this? How do we create this link, this avenue from learning to pleasure so that that is something that's embedded in our minds? And certainly laughter is one way to do that. A man named Norman Cousins once was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and in conjunction with his doctors, he devised his own treatment plan, the most important part of which to him was laughing. And he watched Marx Brothers movies, those were his favorites, and whatever else he could think of that would really make him laugh. And he said that laughing is like internal jogging. It moves your organs around, it enhances respiration, it is an igniter of great expectations. It is an igniter of great expectations. So what are those expectations? Those expectations that what we are going to learn, we will learn with pleasure. And laughter, humor is one way to do that. Now, one of the subjects I've taught over the years is history. And we already know, of course, how dull and boring and dry history is. You're supposed to disagree with me here. Murmur, 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 thank you. But I do have a couple of stories to show you that humor can be a way into learning history. One is a story about Winston Churchill, the great Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. And you probably all know a little bit about him. Very inspiring speaker, helped his people resist the onslaught of the Nazis. A truly incredible man, an icon. Well, Winston Churchill was also famously fond of his brandy and his cigars. And one night he was at a dinner party, and he had had a few of those brandies. And a woman came up to him and said, "Mr. Churchill, you are drunk." And Winston Churchill turned to her and said, "Yes, madam. And in the morning, I shall be sober, and you will still be ugly." Ouch. But isn't that a different way to see Winston Churchill? That he is no longer this sort of larger-than-life figure that nobody could really ever be like him. He's a man, and he's a funny man. Another story that also takes place during World War II, and this time in Berlin, in downtown Berlin, the heart of the Nazi Empire, and it's on a city bus. And the bus is full. And climbing onto the stairs of the bus is a stormtrooper. No, not Star Wars. This is the SS men, the primary enforcers of the Nazi regime were called stormtroopers. And he climbs up onto the bus, and he is dressed in his full Nazi regalia, all puffed up with pride. And he starts walking down the aisle of the bus, and a little old lady sticks out her foot, trips him. And he goes splat down the aisle of the bus. And everybody in the bus breaks into spontaneous applause. And the little old lady turns to the person next to her and says, "I know it's not much, but that's my 5th one today." Isn't that a different picture of resistance? Instead of being this abstract idea that, how could you resist something as powerful as the Nazi machine? Yes, you can. A little old lady with her foot was able to do that. Now, what happens in your brain when you laugh like that, when humor is used? I just happen to have a brain here. Well, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I just removed it this morning. This is a brain. And what first happens when you hear a story like the Churchill story or the bus story is the left hemisphere of your brain processes the language. I mean, you have to understand what the words mean. If there's anything unusual in there, your brain tries to put that with other things that it already knows. But then another part of your brain that comes into use is the amygdala, which is a deep internal structure here that processes emotions. And the amygdala not only processes emotions, it also helps to store memories. So the emotions that come with laughter are part of what leads to your learning, that the amygdala not only stores those memories, it also decides where in the brain to store them. Isn't that amazing, that laughing could be something that helps you to learn? Now, Albert Einstein once said, I think I'll put my brain down. Albert Einstein once said that the supreme art of the teacher is to awaken joy in creative expression, joy in knowledge, or like Norman Cousins said, to be the igniter of great expectations. So let's say that I or any of your other teachers have done that for you. They've ignited those expectations. Your brain is really pumped to learn. But how do you solidify that? How do you make that something where the fire is always burning in you? When the laughs are gone, when the teachers are gone, how do you make that real? And that is through achievement. You have to do something. You have to accomplish something. You have to challenge yourself. You have to go beyond what you thought was possible. Now, I used to say to my students, the inside of your head feels good when you know stuff. I wish I could show you that on that brain. And maybe Carl Sagan said it better, that understanding is joyous. Understanding is joyous. I have a lot of examples, but I just want to tell you a couple. One is a young man that I had in 8th grade a long time ago. And I always had a project where you had to pick a historical character and you had to act them out. You had to use first-person language. You had to use the body language of the person. It was not a report. It was a becoming. And this young man was probably the shyest student I ever had. He always sat with his head down. He never made eye contact, never said a word in class. And when it came time to choose his historical character, he picked Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, can you think of anybody that is more of a giant of history? And yet, when the day of the performance came, I always sat in the back of the room, you know, the teacher with the clipboard and the checklist, and I'm supposed to be assessing him, right? I forgot to do that because he was so phenomenal. He really did become Martin Luther King. Something took control of him, and he made this amazing performance. And it changed him. It taught him that he was in charge of his own fire. And from then on, he was a different kind of a kid. He was a different kind of a person. Now, it doesn't have to be big like that. It can be something small, like in my American history classes, I always used to like to teach the Charleston. Can I have some No, I'm kidding. Oh, there are some dancers here in the front row that are phenomenal. Or they were in the front row. I don't know where they are now. But I used to teach the Charleston in class and make a line, and it was completely voluntary, you know, teach them the song, play the Charleston song on the record player. Do you guys know what record players are? And there was one girl that always swore she would never take part in anything. She had a real barrier against any kind of participation. And wouldn't you know, after a couple of minutes, there she was right next to me. And truth be told, she had 2 left feet, and she really had a hard time doing the 1, 2, 1, 2. And then all of a sudden, she was doing it. And pretty soon, the bell rang, and she wouldn't let me take the record off the record. You know, she just kept dancing. Because for her, it was a victory. For her, it was something that she could do. Or maybe it was just a student who passed a test for the first time, or who did or finally understood some kind of concept. That's what makes it real. Not me, you. So, kids these days, of course you're different. Your world, as Mr. Boland said this morning, is changing so rapidly it's almost incomprehensible. But you know what? When it comes down to it, we're all human beings. And we are all about learning. And what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. Thank you.